How's it going, everybody? Hope you guys are doing well. Well, here it is, guys. This is the new Blade Torrent 110 FPV quadcopter. This just came in 4 or 5 days ago, but I've been flying this thing quite a bit. I've been flying it all week. You can see it's got some grass stains on it. The prop guards are gone. And I'm going to cover a lot of ground in this review. I'm going to go over the quadcopter, the specs, talk about what I like and what I don't like, and of course the flight performance, because it's definitely going to be a popular quadcopter, and there really is quite a bit to talk about with it. So first, the basics. In the box, it either comes as a bind and fly basic or as a plug and play. So in the box, you have the quadcopter. You have a set of instructions, which are small, this nice little instruction booklet right here. And then you have a bag with some extras in it, some zip ties for repairs. You have some Velcro for attaching the battery, some extra screws, some extra padding material, and you also have an Allen key so you can take the quadcopter apart, remove the props. This is designed to run on a 2-cell 800 milliamp hour pack or a 3-cell 450 milliamp hour pack, and it has the JST connector. So guys, this is a 110 millimeter frame, which means 110 millimeters from motor to motor. And just to give you guys an idea of the size, I'll show you that adjacent to an Inductrix FPV, and you can see, of course, that it is definitely larger. The setup is pretty straightforward in the instructions. It goes over all the radio parameters you need for your DX radio. One thing just to note, you want to change the frame rate to 11 milliseconds from 22 milliseconds, and you also want to reverse the aileron and rudder. Pretty basic to set it up. Once you have that done, you'll have your throttle arm, throttle cut on switch H, and you'll have your 3 flight modes on switch B. So those are the main switches you need to be aware of. And then you have, of course, your trim tabs and your expo, dual rates, all that kind of stuff as usual. So we'll go over the specs real quick. Of course, just to mention, you do need your own transmitter, battery charger, and FPV headset or monitor. And I'll just be using my old Fat Shark Dominator V2s with the single Spironet antenna. That works for me, so I'm going to be using that one. This uses Blade 1104 7600 kV motors running 2-inch props, 1.5 millimeter mounting holes. It comes with a 150 milliwatt video transmitter in North America. In Europe, you get a 25 milliwatt video transmitter. 4-in-1 ESC running BL Heli, Spectrum Quad race receiver, and you have the F3 flight controller, which is Betaflight configured, so you can actually go in there and tune your quad through Betaflight. 600 TVL camera with 120 degree field of view, and you are using a linear antenna on the video transmitter, and you can see that on the top of the quad right there. As of right now, there are spare parts available from Horizon Hobby, all the spare parts basically, and you can also get different colored bodies if you want to change the body color. Let's look at some of the features on the quad itself. Of course, I mentioned 2 millimeter carbon fiber frame, X-frame there. You can see those motors are mounted with 4 screws on the bottom. Prop guards are off because I broke one, but the prop guard does form part of the motor mount here. So instead of taking all the screws out and remounting it, I just cut the prop guards off with some shears. Just at all the points they are attached, just cut them right off, and now they're gone. You can get replacement parts, of course. If you do break them and want to replace them, that's not a problem. The camera is tiltable. It's got this little lever up here, so you can tilt it from looking straight ahead if you just want to fly slowly and hover around, to tilting it at this most extreme up angle that you can get. And that's pretty decent for flying the quad pretty fast. Now this tilt is a little bit difficult to move it. It kind of ratchets and it's kind of stuck. It doesn't move all that well. So just be aware of that. I have it set in the most extreme up angle. I'm not going to change it, so I'm fine with it right there. Of course, you have your antennas for your receiver, and then you have the linear antenna for the FPV transmitter. The bind button for the quadcopter is located right here underneath the camera. You can see right there, so you do need to push that in and then power up the quadcopter to get it into bind mode and bind it to your transmitter. Video transmitter selector button is right here, so you can change your channels and your bands, and it has bands A, B, and E, as well as Fat Shark immersion and also race band. So all your bands are available there, and there's a little LED board right here which will tell you what band you're in. As I mentioned, it's running the F3 flight controller with Betaflight, and right here on this side port, you can see there's a little micro USB port right there, so you can plug this into your computer and you can tune it in Betaflight. I did want to give you guys the weights for the quadcopter. The dry weight without the prop guards is 76 grams, as you see right here. With the prop guards, it's 85 grams. So by removing the prop guards, you save 9 grams. With the 3S400 50 milliamp pack, it's 134 grams all up. And with the 2S800 pack, it's 131 grams all up. So this does fall far below the FAA minimum for putting your registration number on it. You do not need it to fly this quadcopter. So just to go over the flight modes, guys, you have those on switch B. Position 0 is angle mode or self-level mode. The quadcopter is limited to around 60-degree bank angle, and that's your good beginner mode there. If you're just starting out with quadcopters, especially FPV quads, that's where you're going to want to start with until you get used to it. Position 1 is air mode acro, so you can do your loops and rolls. At lower throttle settings, the flight controller will still give control inputs to the motors, so it gives you a nice smooth flight. I actually really like air mode quite a bit. And then you have your standard acro mode in position 2, and that's what you're probably going to use for all-out racing. The fail-safe on this quadcopter, guys, is basically just a throttle cut. So if your quadcopter receiver loses signal from the transmitter, the flight controller is going to tell the motors to stop, and that prevents it from flying away. But if it's at 100 feet in the air, it's going to drop straight from 100 feet in the air. So that's basically what's going to happen if you lose signal to the quadcopter. All right, guys, I hope you're still awake. I know that's a lot of dry stuff about this quadcopter, but let's talk about what's really fun about it, and that is flying it. I'm going to go over the different flight modes and what I think of them. Let's start with angle mode. That's your self-level mode. Like I mentioned before, if you're just starting out, that's the mode you want to go in. And once you get used to that, you're going to want to go into the acro modes pretty quickly. But in self-level mode, you can still have some fun with it. It's still fairly fast. You can't get it quite as fast as the other modes, but you can still fly it pretty quickly. You can still punch it out pretty fast. You've still got the same amount of power and thrust, but you do have self-level, so it is going to be a little bit easier to fly the quad. Now, I did notice after a minute or two flying it in angle mode, it would start to drift a bit, and mine would consistently drift to the right. So it seems like after you fly it around for a while, it kind of loses its self-leveling ability. It loses its kind of sense of what is level, and you can either trim it out, or what I would just do is land it, unplug it, plug it back in on a level surface, take off, and then it will be hovering nice and level again after that. So it's not a big deal, but just be aware of it. It might start to drift on you. You might start finding yourself holding the stick, to the left or to the right maybe, or whatever it is, to keep it hovering level. It just seems to happen. That's the way it is. And that is basically angle mode. After, a while of flying it in angle mode, you're probably going to want to go to the acro modes anyway and just forget all that self-leveling stuff. All right, let's talk about the air mode and the acro mode, because that is really where the fun is with this quadcopter. And I'm having a blast flying it with those modes. Now, guys, I'm not an expert, acro quad flyer by any stretch at all. In fact, I haven't even been flying quads for a while because I've been flying that Aptera all the time. So I kind of let those go by the wayside and haven't been flying them. But this feels really easy. It feels really natural. I really like the way it's tuned. It's very smooth. You can roll it fast. You can roll it slow. You can punch it, turn it upside down, and feel like you can just come out of it. It's just really easy to fly. I almost feel like this is kind of an acro mode trainer. So if you're going from a smaller single cell quad, but you don't want to jump into a 250 size quad running 4S and that's a total beast, this is a nice intermediate step. Now, there are a lot of quadcopters coming out in this size and even smaller that are brushless, so there's a lot of options in this kind of area, but this seems like a really nice one if you just want to get into flying at acro, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Now, the only thing I will say is that consistently, if I fly it in an open field where I'm really mashing the throttle, I'm only getting about 2 minutes of flight time. Now, if I fly it in the woods, through the trees and things like that, where I have to be a little bit more careful with the throttle, especially making turns and things like that, I am getting 3 minutes, 15 seconds. So they do advertise 3 to 4 minutes. In the open field, I'm really only getting 2 minutes. And after those 2 minutes, those 450 packs are pretty hot. They're not too hot to hold, but they're pretty hot. The motors are hot, the quadcopter seems hot, and draining those packs down in 2 minutes is drawing a fair amount of current from them. The other thing is, when I put them, to check them after I fly, and they feel like that, I'm getting them at about 10.5 volts, and that's lower than I like. I like my packs to be around 11.2 at LVC, and 10.5 is getting kind of low. If you get below 10 volts, you're risking permanent damage and ruining your battery packs. So they are being drained pretty aggressively by this quadcopter with the way it is set up. LVC, by the way, guys, when it hits LVC, it's pretty sudden. It doesn't give you much warning. It's about a second or two, the throttle goes down, and then it just cuts out, the quadcopter drops. When that happens, your video cuts out, and then it will come back on. So just be aware of that. I think, if I'm flying it in the open field, I might just have to set my timer at 1 minute 45 seconds, which is a pretty short flight. So that's my only real complaint there. There is some jello that I get occasionally with the flying, especially when you're flying it, really mashing the throttle. This is not a quadcopter where you're trying to take nice video and things like that, but it's not, so it's not so much that it bothers me that much, but it's there. If you punch the throttle too much, you will sometimes see a little bit of jello. All right, guys, well, there is a lot to talk about with this quadcopter, and I have hopefully not bored you guys too much and showed you some video of what it can do. In summary, I think I'm just going to go over some pros and cons, basically, and let you know what I think about it. So let's start with the pros. I think it's well designed. I think the camera on this one is well protected. Blade hasn't always done that with some of their quadcopters. This thing can definitely take a hit. Now the prop guards did break, but the rest of it seems like it's pretty durable, pretty well protected, and you're going to be able to smash it around a bit and it's going to survive. It's pretty lightweight. You don't need your FAA number on it, which is always great. It's very easy to set up. The radio setup is quite easy. Just follow the instructions. I had no problems there at all. The acro modes are very manageable if you're new to acro. As I mentioned, I think it's like a good mode for acro training in a way, and it's really a lot of fun to punch the quad and just do those loops and do those rolls. And like I said, good power and good punch. That's a positive. The video transmitter is good. It's got a nice range for it. So this one is in North America. It has a 150 milliwatt transmitter. Unlike Europe, you'll get the 25 milliwatt. At one point, I did try to fly this from the bench where I normally sit into an area where I wouldn't usually go with a 25 milliwatt transmitter, because that area is behind a little grove of trees. It's behind the playground equipment, and you really do get blocked line of sight. I did fly it over there. I had a little success, and then I kind of lost the video feed and it went down. I don't think that's really a fault of the video transmitter. There's just too much stuff in between. But generally flying through trees and things like that aren't a problem at all. And by the way, on the video that I show you, it always seems like there's more interference showing up than what I experience when I'm flying it. Maybe it's because you don't notice it so much when you're actually flying it through the goggles, but I feel like the video signal, the colors, everything like that is actually very, very good. Having spare parts available is actually a big bonus, guys. A lot of times you can have trouble getting spare parts. They've got them all stocked. Betaflight, which is tunable right through the quadcopter, don't have to take it apart, definitely a positive. And this thing is great for proximity flying. It's really fun flying it through the trees. I'm having a blast doing that. All right, guys, those are the positives, and there are quite a few for this quadcopter. I'm not going to talk about whether this quadcopter is worth it for the money, because price is completely an opinion, and price always changes as well. So, you either think it's worth it or you think it's not worth it. So far, let me just say I think the quadcopter is worth it. With that, I do have to talk about the negatives because they are there. The biggest is the low flight time. Getting 2 minutes in the field when you're flying it, with fairly high throttle and being aggressive is still pretty short. And to land it and have a very hot battery that's discharged to 10.5 volts is a little concerning. Those batteries are not going to last that long being discharged to that level. The camera tilts, that's great. It's a little difficult to move it on the frame. It's kind of stiff, it ratchets. Once you get in your position that you like though, you're fine, just leave it alone. The LVC cuts off very suddenly. I don't really like that. I wish I had maybe a little more time for the LVC so I could land it. If you're 100 feet and you hit LVC, you're going to be at 90 feet when it just drops out of the sky. And you do have the video cut out, but then it does come back in. There is some jello at times. It's not terrible, but it is there. Just be aware of that. And then the quad does not have LED lights, and that's not a deal breaker or anything. I would like it to have LED lights so that if you race your friends or other quadcopters, they can see you and you can see them. Not a deal breaker, but it would be nice if it had just 1 or 2 LED lights in the back. Well, that is a lot of information for you guys. This Blade Torrent 110, it's a great little quadcopter overall. I think it's going to be very popular with people. And like I said, I think it's a great intermediate step, which might bring a lot of people up from flying those tiny whoops into flying the larger, 4S and above quads that are really aggressive and you can fly really hard. So in that sense, great little quadcopter. It's definitely fun. I think it is durable. I'm not going to repeat myself over and over again here, guys. I think that's what I'm doing. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. I thank you guys for watching. And as always, I'll see you next time.